To certainly exist is to perceive. To practically exist is to be perceived. Perception is merely a matter of sensory detection. Perception is given depth by thought. Descartes says, "I think, therefore I am." The fullest and surest form of existence lies in perceiving, perhaps even more so, thinking. Merely being perceived is sufficient to grant one practical existence, and one that neither perceives nor is perceived fails to exist. The human enters the world. It carries with it an innate and inherent force. Its nature. The ability to perceive pain and pleasure. The ability to perceive and think. The capacity for intelligence. The capacity for great happiness and immense suffering. The capacity for so very much. The capacity to be moulded by the world it is to be subject to. In essence, it is a piece of clay, half moulded. It is whole and semi-formed by its nature, but the process of moulding will go on for as long as it does. Nurture is given dominion over the clay that has not yet been moulded by nature. It is for these forces, and these forces alone, to mould the clay creation. Nature and the environment, they are the great clay workers. It is they who will make the difference between a beautiful work of art or grotesque abomination, or something perfectly dull. A person is merely a piece of clay moulded by nature and nurture into a creation that can be as beautiful or grotesque as its creators allow. What is emotion if not a curse of nature induced by both nature itself and the environment? Emotion is so frequently devoid of rationality, oftentimes plagued with irrationality. Although it can be conquered by the rational, at least to some limited extent. The purpose of life can be boiled down to the ultimate axioms: pain and pleasure. The inescapable, indescribable forces that give everything else its meaning. The inherent evil and inherent good. One pursues pleasure and runs from pain. But oh, how many forms this can take. Some certainly more rational than others. All aspiration is founded on these forces. All aspiration is founded on the pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain. Aspiration represents a pursuit of happiness or satisfaction or fulfillment or purpose or meaning. All forms of pleasure. Sometimes it merely represents an attempt to escape pain. Forms of pain such as emptiness and meaninglessness. Or pure true pain induced by a failure to live up to expectations, be they the expectations of oneself or another. So often the human is enslaved to an internal irrationality that threatens to unleash great suffering. For those that live, there are two gods: pain and pleasure. There is rationality, the ultimate tool for desirable engagement with them. And there is oneself, the subject. One dwells beneath them. One would be wise to adopt rationality. For these gods will be softer on those who adopt rationality. That is the condition of the living. But they do not live forever. One day they stumble and fall. Their struggles come to an abrupt end, with an eternal rest, an endless sleep. They would be wise to be ready for such a rest, to embrace it without fear or regret. They would be wise not to live dreading it, for it will get them either way, whether they subject themselves to unnecessary suffering or not. And it hides no horrors, beyond eternity without the wonder that is fraught. But fear of it is far more extreme than rationality could ever justify. Intense, irrational fear. One ought to think so much in life that they have had enough of thinking when it comes the time to no longer think. And as unappealing as it may be to be deprived of the ability to think for eternity, so much more terrible is the prospect of endless thought. One can learn to take comfort in the prospect of endless rest and endless sleep. Of course, one's demise is almost always rationally undesirable. But the fear of it is deeply irrational. It is the curse of the living to fear death. Natural selection has given us a cruel curse, an intense and irrational fear of death. But thankfully the rational can counteract the instinctual, at least to some extent. Perhaps it is this ability to consider, criticize, and counteract instinct that separates us from the animal. The capacity for rationality has often been considered the defining quality of the human race. Still, such ideas are not without troublesome implications and justifications, sometimes rationally undesirable ones. The rationality of a creature could so easily be rendered invisible by the lack of an opposable thumb. Certainly, our rationality, our intelligence at large, has blessed us with the ability to ask and answer, to ponder and consider. What are we? What is this? Why is this? Where is this? Why are we? What is the human condition, if not the constant buzz of wonder sometimes, confusion often, and questions always, and the endless attempt to silence that buzz, often temporarily? For some the buzz can be ignored. For others it is deafening and demands attention.